He told his wife they were going for a peaceful walk. What he planned was far from peaceful. She was left in the woods to die, until someone unexpected stepped in. This story is more than a betrayal. It will show how cruelty turns against the one who created it. If you believe that evil must be punished, don't miss a second, because the ending will leave you breathless. Post in the comments, where are you watching from? Deep in the heart of Oregon's sprawling forest preserve, where the ancient pines whispered age-old secrets and the crisp air carried hints of pine and damp earth, the Johnsons arrived under the pretense of a much-needed retreat from the burdens of everyday life. To an unsuspecting outsider, the journey seemed like a well-intentioned attempt at rekindling romance, a chance to reconnect in nature's embrace. But beneath the surface of this pastoral escape lay a tangled web of despair, betrayal, and dark resolve. Mari Johnson, a gentle soul with eyes that shone with unyielding hope, had once been the very picture of warmth and kindness. Since a tragic accident several years ago had left her wheelchair-bound, her life had been transformed from one filled with unencumbered movement and spontaneity to a daily struggle against physical limitations. Yet, despite the heavy chains of her disability, Mari remained remarkably tender and optimistic. Her belief in the transformative power of love and connection never waned. Even when her body protested every step and each task became a monumental challenge. In her soft-spoken manner and quiet smile, there was an aura of resilience that touched everyone she met. She treated every day as a gift, and though she required care and gentleness, she was not a victim. Instead, she was a beacon of compassion, always ready with words of encouragement for anyone in need. Her husband, Glenn Johnson, presented a stark contrast. Once a man of promising potential, life's long and oppressive weight had turned him inward. Now a middle-aged auto mechanic with tired eyes and a face often etched in frowns, Glenn had grown cold and irritable under the relentless pressure of caregiving. The constant demands of managing Mari's physical needs, helping her navigate ramps, assisting with daily routines, and enduring the endless practicalities of a life constrained by disability, had drained him of both energy and passion. Each day, as he mechanically went about his duties, an undercurrent of bitterness gnawed at him. His soul, once capable of tenderness, now flickered with resentment. The spark of warmth in his eyes had long been replaced by a calculating, distant stare. Behind closed doors and whispered confessions, Glenn's true feelings emerged. A deep-seated frustration and a secret, illicit flame that had long been kindled in the shadows. For months, even years, he had carried on a furtive relationship with Victoria, a young, vivacious woman whose presence stirred long-dormant desires in him. Victoria was everything his wife was not: spontaneous, energetic, and free from the burdens of infirmity. With her by his side, Glenn rationalized that he could escape the relentless monotony and sorrow that had come to define his life. In his mind, the prospect of repaying a debt of remorse by abandoning his wife and embracing a new life with Victoria was growing ever more appealing. He had begun to see Mari not as the cherished partner of his youth but as an encumbrance, a burden that held him back from reclaiming the life he craved. On the day of their arrival in the forest preserve, the stage was set with an unsettling quiet. The winding road, bordered by towering firs and carpeted with fallen needles, led them to a secluded clearing far removed from prying eyes. With a sky so vast and blue that it almost seemed to mock the concealing shadows of human deceit, Glenn had meticulously planned this excursion not as a romantic getaway, but as a calculated facade. The couple's vehicle, an aging station wagon that creaked and groaned as if in sympathy, pulled up alongside a narrow, gravel path surrounded by dense woods. It was here, in this remote haven, that Glenn intended to execute the unimaginable. Mistaking the natural beauty of the surroundings for an invitation to vulnerability, Mari's face lit up at the sight of the rolling hills and unfettered wilderness. "Isn't it just beautiful, Glenn?" she asked in a soft, hopeful tone as she adjusted her position in the wheelchair. Her words, full of genuine wonder and trust, cut deep into the fabric of his resolve. Glenn forced a smile, his mind already racing with the nefarious plans he had carefully laid out. He had already arranged for Victoria to meet him later by a secondary vehicle parked out of sight, an accomplice to his betrayal whose presence was destined to seal her fate. The atmosphere in the car during the drive was thick with unspoken tension. While Mari hummed quietly to herself, her spirit undimmed by the hardships of the past, Glenn's thoughts churned with a dangerous resolve. Every mile that brought them deeper into the forest seemed to echo his grim determination, to rid himself of the shackles of responsibility, to be free from the very empathy and love he had once swore to cherish. He convinced himself that in the isolation of nature, among the silent witness of ancient trees and hidden life, he could sever the ties that bound him to a past that no longer suited him. Unbeknownst to Mari, every careful word of admiration he offered was a thinly veiled prelude to the unthinkable act he had planned. As they drove along a meandering country road, the sunlight dappled through the foliage overhead, casting fleeting patterns on Mari's delicate features. She gazed out at the landscape with eyes that reflected unwavering faith, the kind that believed even in the midst of human frailty, goodness could flourish. In that innocent reverie, she did not perceive the cynical glint that fleetingly passed over Glenn's eyes when he glanced at the rearview mirror, as if silently bidding farewell to a life she would soon be forced to endure alone. For Glenn, this day had become the culmination of years of simmering bitterness and relentless disappointment. The forest, with all its grandeur and haunting beauty, was about to bear witness to an act of cruelty that would forever alter the course of their lives. With every passing moment, the natural world around them seemed to grow quieter, almost conspiratorial, as if it, too, anticipated the betrayal that was to unfold. In that secluded wilderness, under a sky vast enough to hold both hope and despair, the stage had been set for Glenn's drastic and callous decision. The station wagon creaked to a halt on a gravel road winding deep into Oregon's wild forest reserve, far removed from the hum of civilization and the clamor of daily routine. Here, among ancient trees whose gnarled trunks whispered of forgotten eras and canopies that filtered sunlight into soft, trembling patterns on the forest floor, the Johnsons' vacation was about to take a dark turn. The vehicle rolled to a stop in a secluded clearing, a small, undisturbed patch of nature that Glenn had chosen meticulously. To any onlooker, the setting appeared serene and restorative, a hidden haven where the burdens of modern life might temporarily fade. Yet beneath the gentle exterior of ferns and moss, a treacherous plan was unfolding. Mari, ever hopeful despite the physical constraints imposed by her wheelchair, gazed around in quiet wonder. Her eyes, wide and filled with innocent anticipation, reflected the shimmering shafts of sunlight as they pierced the emerald canopy. "Glenn, isn't it breathtaking?" she murmured, her voice soft like a whispered prayer. Her tender smile, though touched by a habitual sadness, lit up her features, a beacon of ghastly resilience in the midst of her struggles. Every word was imbued with the unconditional trust she maintained, a faith in love that had once defined her entire existence. In these unspoiled surroundings, it was as if the forest itself was embracing her, promising a reprieve from the ceaseless challenges of her daily life. Glenn, seated in the front with a veneer of forced calm, nodded mechanically. His face, carved with lines of irritation and hardened resolve, betrayed nothing of the inner tumult that had led him to this fateful decision. In his mind, every tree and whisper of wind was just a silent accomplice to the escape he had long dreaded to enact, the escape from a life of obligation, passion replaced by resentment. He deliberately leaned forward and said in a clipped tone, "Mari, come with me for a moment. I want to show you something special." His words, though coded in the language of affection, served a far more calculated purpose. He gestured gently toward a gently sloping hill that ascended from the clearing, a natural lookout with a panoramic view of rolling meadows and dense forests stretching beneath the vast Oregon sky. Oblivious to the true intent behind his invitation, Mari carefully navigated her wheelchair along the soft, leaf-strewn path. Each push of the wheels seemed to echo with the rhythm of hope and the promise of nature's solace. As they advanced up the hill, the view gradually unfolded, a tapestry of green that sparkled in the sunlight. Mari inhaled deeply, savoring the fresh, pine-scented air, her eyes moist with quiet wonder. Glenn paused beside her at the hill's crest, turning slightly to admire the expansive overlook while feigning gentle concern. "It's beautiful, isn't it? I thought you'd like to take a little break and just enjoy the view," he said, his tone even and strangely detached. But as Mari's attention was fixated on the mesmerizing scene, a living, breathing artwork of nature that seemed endless, Glenn's mind drifted to a plan far removed from the innocent beauty before them. His heart, already long encased in a layer of bitterness and accumulated fatigue, had been growing colder with each passing day. The distant echo of his own discontent manifested in the furtive glance he took at his phone. A short text from Victoria, his younger lover, arrived with a curt confirmation. "I'm waiting at the second vehicle. Hurry." The message was curt and laced with the promise of escape. Glenn's eyes darkened imperceptibly as he pocketed the phone. In that moment, the lush tapestry of the forest, the quiet murmur of nature, and even Mari's serene vulnerability, all became mere background noise to his meticulously rehearsed betrayal. Without a trace of remorse or indication of inner conflict, Glenn excused himself with an abrupt, "Stay here, Mari. Rest a while and take in the view. I'll be right back." His voice, although measured, failed to hide the detachment behind his practiced words. Mari, too absorbed in the beauty of the moment, offered a small, trusting smile and nodded lightly. Unbeknownst to her, the very next few minutes would alter the course of her life irrevocably. Glenn's departure was as swift as it was heartless. He turned away, his steps light and unburdened as he retraced his way back along the winding path. He merged onto the narrow road leading further into the forest, where another clearly concealed vehicle awaited him. Victoria, with her eyes alight with secret anticipation and a tide of adrenaline pulsing in her veins, emerged from the shadows of the second car. In a brief, almost imperceptible glance exchanged between them, the unspoken plan crystallized into reality. They would leave Mari to the solitude of the deep woods. There would be no heartfelt apologies, no frantic calls to rescue her. The wilderness would be her unintended prison. Meanwhile, high above in the dappled sunlight, Mari remained unaware of the deception unfolding in her stead. With every passing minute, her heart fluttered in quiet contentment, her thoughts drifting between memories of kinder days and dreams of endless adventures. Yet as the clearing silence deepened, an unsettling emptiness began to creep in where human warmth once resided. The gentle rustling of leaves and the distant call of a songbird were the only companions to her solitude. In that cruel twist of fate, the idyllic serenity of the forest concealed a dark secret. A devoted husband, embittered and desperate, had chosen to forsake the very person who had loved him unconditionally. And as Glenn's tires crunched away into the distance with Victoria, the forest, with all its ancient wisdom, bore silent witness to a betrayal that would reverberate far beyond these secluded woods. Alone and abandoned on that secluded forest hill, Mari's world seemed to crumble around her. The beautiful vista that her husband had urged her to admire now felt like a cruel illusion, a gilded panorama concealing a heartless betrayal. As the minutes turned slowly into an hour, the silence of the wilderness grew oppressive. The gentle rustling of the leaves and the whisper of the wind, once a source of solace, now mocked the loneliness that had suddenly engulfed her. Mari's mind raced with questions that had no answers. How could the man she had once loved, whom she had trusted implicitly, leave her here, vulnerable and isolated, in the very place where nature's beauty should have brought peace? Instead, it offered only cold indifference. In the fading light of late afternoon, Mari's emotions overwhelmed her. Each push of the wheelchair's wheels along the soft, leaf-strewn path echoed her mounting despair. Tears welled up in her eyes as her thoughts swirled in a vortex of sorrow and disbelief. She recalled the warm, kind words she had once exchanged with Glenn, moments that now felt like distant memories. Instead, bitter resentment and fear gripped her heart. The trust that had once buoyed her spirit was shattered, leaving her adrift in a wilderness that was as unforgiving as the betrayal itself. As the subtle chill of approaching dusk set in, Mari paused by the crest of the hill. Her gaze, once fixed on the awe-inspiring landscape, now turned inward, searching for forgotten fragments of strength. In that desperate silence, she wondered aloud in a trembling voice, why would he do this? The words were lost to the vastness of the woods, swallowed by the shadows that grew longer with each passing minute. Unbeknownst to Mari, hidden among the gnarled trunks and dense underbrush, she was not entirely alone. Observing her from a discreet distance was a solitary figure, a man who had long chosen the life of quiet seclusion over the complexities of society. His name was John, a rugged, weathered veteran whose eyes had seen both the ravages of time and the burden of secrets. Having once served in intelligence and lived his life amidst shadows and hidden truths, John had retreated to these woods, finding in nature both refuge and a means to rediscover a semblance of peace. His small cabin, built by his own calloused hands, stood not far from where Mari now sat, vulnerable and heartbroken. John had been watching silently as he passed by the woodland trails on his routine walk at dusk. The sight of Mari's solitary figure stirred something deep within him, a mixture of empathy and a resolve that the injustices of betrayal should never be allowed to fester unchallenged. He noted the slow, heavy rhythm of her movements and the unmistakable aura of desolation that surrounded her like a shroud. Quietly, he moved closer, careful not to startle her, his face etched with the compassion of a man who had witnessed more than his fair share of human suffering. At first, Mari did not see him. Her eyes were fixed on the horizon, as if searching for remnants of the safe past she used to know. But then, through the thinning dusk, a gentle voice broke through the silence. "Are you all right?" The question was tender and unassuming, carrying a warmth that stood in stark contrast to the bitter chill of her isolation. Startled, Mari turned her tear-streaked face toward the sound. There, emerging from behind a stand of cedar trees, was John. In his late 60s, his hair a mix of silver and the deep brown of the forest floor, he wore a simple weathered jacket and sturdy boots that had clearly seen many miles of rugged trails. His eyes, though marked by age and hardship, shone with a kindness that immediately put Mari at ease. I'm fine," she managed to reply at first, her voice quivering and barely audible. But the gentle concern in John's gaze warmed her, and she hesitated before adding, I'm not sure I am." In that moment of vulnerability, John knelt beside her, respecting her space yet unmistakably present. "I know it can get very lonely out here," he said softly. "Sometimes the world can feel as cold as these woods, but you don't have to face the darkness alone." His words, measured and sincere, reverberated in Mari's heart. For the first time since the betrayal, she allowed herself to lean into the possibility that a caring stranger might offer her some form of consolation. "My name's John," he introduced himself gently, extending a cracked but steady hand. "I live nearby, in a small cabin down the trail. Perhaps I can help you find shelter for the night, and if you'd like, lend an ear." Mari's eyes startled with a mixture of gratitude and cautious relief. Despite her shock and lingering pain, the genuine warmth in John's voice stirred a fragile hope inside her. She took a hesitant step toward him, and with a trembling nod, she agreed to let him offer the help she so desperately needed. "I am Mari," she replied, her voice soft yet laden with the weight of her heartbreak. I don't understand why I'm here. I trusted someone, and now I'm left alone." John's eyes softened even further. "Sometimes life's path takes us through dark places we never anticipated," he said, choosing his words with the wisdom of someone who had seen many hard truths. "I've had my share of shadows, but I've learned that even when the world feels harsh and cold, there are those who will look out for you. Come with me, Mari. Let's get you somewhere safe tonight. You deserve to rest and perhaps, just maybe, to begin healing." Relief mingled with lingering sorrow on Mari's face as she allowed John to guide her away from the lonely hilltop. With each careful push of her wheelchair along the winding dirt path, she felt a little less abandoned and a little more seen. The forest, though still vast and imposing, now held a glimmer of unexpected solace. Her silent tears accompanied by the quiet conversation and comforting presence of this gentle stranger. As they walked along the leaf-strewn trail, John spoke in hushed tones about the forest's rhythms, the changing seasons, and how nature always found a way to nurture its wounded. Mari listened closely, absorbing every word as if it were a balm for her wounded spirit. In turn, she began to share fragments of her own story, the dreams that had once bloomed brightly, the love that she had given so freely, and the deep ache of betrayal that now defined her every thought. John listened, without judgment, his steady gaze and calm demeanor offering a safe space for the raw truth of her emotions. In the depths of that Oregon forest, amidst towering trees and dancing shadows, a profound act of unexpected kindness unfolded. John's intervention, born of his own life's tribulations, had saved Mari from an ordeal that might otherwise have left her permanently lost in despair. As they neared his modest cabin, a snug refuge tucked away against the backdrop of ancient ferns and mossy logs, Mari felt that, for the first time since her betrayal, someone truly cared. While the wounds of her past would not vanish overnight, the presence of John lit a small but steady flame of hope. In that quiet haven among the pines, as the sun dipped low behind the horizon and the forest settled into a peaceful twilight, Mari found herself cradled by compassion. And though the journey ahead promised many challenges, the unanticipated kindness of a solitary man reminded her that even in the bleakest moments, the human spirit can find its way into the light. After escorting Mari safely to his modest cabin, John's heart still pounded with a mixture of compassion and seething indignation. As darkness blanketed the forest and the rhythmic serenade of cicadas filled the cool night air, John's mind turned over everything he had witnessed earlier. He couldn't shake off the image of Glenn's casual departure with cold precision, and the way Mari's hopeful eyes had clouded with despair. His instinct, honed by years of intelligence work and a life spent deciphering hidden meanings in ordinary events, urged him to dig deeper. This was no random abandonment. It was a calculated act of cruelty. And if the quiet woods could speak, they would tell him the truth. The next morning, before the first hints of sunrise touched the treetops, John slipped out of his cabin. His well-worn boots crunched softly on a carpet of pine needles as he made his way along a barely discernible path that led toward the area where he had seen the station wagon pull off. There, hidden beneath the dense foliage that only a wilderness of Oregon could provide, lay the vehicles left behind by Glenn and Victoria. John's practiced eyes quickly spotted details that most would overlook: a set of tire tracks that veered off the beaten path, a glint of metal partially obscured by a fallen branch, and pieces of evidence that hinted at much darker motives. Drawing on memory and his past expertise, John examined the abandoned station wagon first. The car, its paint dulled by age and the relentless caress of weather, was not simply a vehicle. It was a silent witness to Glenn's betrayal. John leaned against the side of the car, kneeling on one knee, and began a meticulous inspection. He noted a small smear of dark residue on the door jamb, a likely trace of hurried, clumsy cleaning, and discovered a torn scrap of paper wedged between the door and the frame. Carefully retrieving it, he unfolded the damp, weathered note. The faded ink and hurried scrawl hinted at a message left in haste. Although it couldn't be read with full clarity, the note mentioned no return, and the forest shall keep our secret. Phrases that sent a chill down his spine. Not satisfied with a single clue, John moved around the vehicle, his sharp eyes catching subtle anomalies. A set of muddy footprints that led away in a purposeful direction, a glint of glass that might have come from a broken window, and even a discarded phone charger that seemed too new and out of place in the desolation of the stop. Each detail was a stitch in a precarious tapestry of deceit. John's mind raced as he pieced them together. The footprints indicated that someone had hurriedly departed, not the gentle steps of someone caring for a disabled spouse, but the rushed and almost incorrigibly careless steps of someone eager to vanish. And the torn note, part of a hurried plan perhaps left behind as a careless mistake, suggested premeditation. John's training had taught him the importance of physical evidence, and he methodically photographed every mark, every fleck of evidence, with a rugged digital camera he always carried. He carefully stored the scraps in an evidence bag retrieved from his worn backpack, a habit born from a past in covert operations. As he documented the scene, fragments of memory from his days in intelligence surfaced. the significance of seemingly mundane details that later unveiled the darkest plots. Now, every scratch, every impression of a foot, every piece of paper that fluttered in the breeze whispered secrets about the true nature of Glenn's plan. After examining the station wagon, John turned his attention to the second vehicle parked at a discreet distance, the one meant for the quick exit with Victoria. There, he noticed a half-buried keychain in the dirt, the metal glinting under the weak light as he brushed away soil with a gloved hand. A keychain rarely told a story, yet this one bore an embossed logo that, although partially eroded, resembled an emblem from a local business. It was a connection, a potential link to Glenn's other ventures, or maybe even a financial entity that might reveal records of the getaway. John tucked it away along with the other evidentiary items, knowing that each piece of physical proof was a cornerstone in constructing the truth. As mid-morning light filtered through the canopy, John sat on a fallen log near the vehicles, his mind methodically processing the clues. The evidence he had gathered pointed relentlessly to premeditated malice. Not only had Glenn abandoned his wife at a vulnerable moment in a deeply isolated spot, but the careless, almost frantic nature of his departure suggested that his act was not born of fleeting impulse but of a cold, deliberate decision. In the quiet solitude of the forest, John's determination grew. His duty now extended beyond rescuing Mari. It was to unmask the man who thought he could commit such a vile act without consequence. Settling his resolve, John activated a secure, satellite-enabled phone, a remnant from his previous life in intelligence, to send a preliminary report of his findings. His old contacts, professionals who still trusted his word and integrity, would know how to handle such evidence. With clear instructions and the promise of further investigation, John transmitted photos and detailed notes outlining his discoveries. He knew the forest had many secrets, but today, it had revealed one that he could no longer keep silent about. As the sun rose higher, painting the forest in hues of amber and green, John took a moment to reflect on the duality of nature. The forest, for all its tranquil beauty, rarely tolerated injustice. It was as if the very land had conspired with him, urging him to bring light to the darkness that threatened to engulf an innocent soul. With a firm sense of justice and the clandestine skills of a former intelligence officer guiding him, John vowed then and there to follow this trail until every hidden truth was laid bare. The trail of deception was clear, and John was ready to take the next bold steps. Somewhere out there, Glenn and Victoria believed they had left no trace of their treachery. Yet beneath the whispering pines and the silent testimony of the forest floor, the echoes of their crime would not be allowed to fade. And John, witness, investigator, and reluctant avenger, was determined that justice would find its way through these ancient woods. After John's meticulous documentation at the scene, his mind was ablaze with the urgency to expose the cruel betrayal behind the abandoned station wagon and its silent testimony of premeditated malice. Determined to ensure that every shred of evidence came to light, John returned to his modest cabin, the very solitude he had embraced for years now fueling a fervor for justice. With the torn scrap note, photos of muddy footprints, the keychain, and every detail he had painstakingly recorded neatly organized in a battered leather portfolio, John knew that the next step was to enlist help from those who once walked in the shadows with him. Long ago, when his days as an intelligence operative were fresh and brimming with purpose, John had built a network of trusted allies, colleagues who had honed their skills in uncovering truths that many wished to keep hidden. Although he had long since left that covert world behind, the embers of his past still burned brightly within him. Now, faced with an injustice that demanded more than solitary righteous anger, John decided to reawaken those old connections. He retrieved a secure, weathered communication device, a relic from his operative days, and composed an encrypted message to a man known only as Hawk, a former intelligence specialist now embedded in a small but influential regional investigative unit. As twilight deepened into night, John worked in the quiet hum of his cabin's single lamp. He compiled a concise yet compelling report outlining his findings. The abandoned vehicles at the secluded clearing, the hastily left note hinting at a sinister no-return directive, the muddy footprints, and the curious keychain bearing a partial logo, all woven together into a narrative that painted a picture of calculated betrayal. His fingers, calloused from years of honest labor and secret missions, trembled slightly as he attached digital photographs and scanned copies of the torn paper. Glenn is not merely a frustrated husband, John wrote in a secure message, but a man who has purposefully abandoned his vulnerable wife in this remote forest, with the complicity of his own love affair, to free himself from all duty and obligation. The response from Hawk was swift and measured. Soon, John received confirmation that his dossier would be examined by a trusted team of investigators who had both the resources and the will to trace every digital fingerprint and physical clue. Their conversation, conducted through coded language reminiscent of old field missions, spoke of verifying vehicle registration records, tracking cell phone signals, and even checking local surveillance footage for any sign of the getaway. Hawk's words, terse yet resolute, reminded John that his evidence might indeed be the spark needed to ignite an investigation that could bring Glenn to justice. Rising with the dawn, John set out on a deliberate journey along a narrow forest trail toward a small town near the preserve, where one of his former colleagues, now working as a forensic analyst for a regional law enforcement agency, resided. In the cool morning air, dew clinging to the underbrush and the forest alive with subtle vibrations of nature, John's every step was laden with memories of missions past. He recalled the nights spent poring over intelligence reports, the feel of classified documents in his hands, and the burning determination to right wrongs no matter how deeply entrenched they were. The forest, usually a silent confidant to his reflective moments, now became both a witness and a partner in his quest for accountability. Upon reaching the small town, a cluster of weathered buildings and quiet streets, John made discreet inquiries at a local evidence-collecting station that served as a temporary hub for sensitive investigations. He shared his dossier with his old contact, a no-nonsense investigator named Marcus, whose sharp mind and unwavering commitment to the truth had earned him respect in both official circles and among shadowy networks. Marcus listened intently as John recounted the details. The evidence gathered at the scene, the hurried departure of Glenn with his clandestine lover Victoria, and most shockingly, the palpable cruelty that had reduced Mari to despair on a lonely hill. Marcus marveled at the precision of John's documentation, remarking that the clues, while seemingly mundane, were the very breadcrumbs that could expose an elaborate web of betrayal and indifference. Together, they spent hours cross-verifying the digital photos, scrutinizing the timestamps on the recorded evidence, and even matching the impressions of the muddy footprints with the tire tracks John had previously photographed. Marcus's analytical acumen and John's field-honed instincts meshed perfectly, and soon they uncovered the first hints of a cover-up that stretched far beyond a simple act of abandonment. The keychain's embossed logo, recognized by Marcus as belonging to a local auto parts supplier, led them to question whether Glenn had recently made large purchases or transactions that could be tracked. Their investigation would now hinge on combining hard evidence with digital forensics, an endeavor that required every ounce of the old skills John had once mastered. Late in the day, as the sun dipped low and painted the sky with hues of fiery orange and deep purple, John and Marcus gathered their preliminary report. They now had a chain of evidence linking Glenn's whereabouts at the critical time, financial records hinting at rapid disbursement of funds to obscure accounts, and corroborating witness statements collected from a couple of local hikers who had seen a suspicious figure near the clearing. The evidence was mounting, and though meticulous and painstaking in its details, each fragment was a testament to Glenn's calculated act against Mari, a cruelty that John could no longer ignore. Deep within, John felt a familiar stirring, a renewed sense of duty, not driven by personal vendetta but by the unwavering principle that justice must prevail. His contacts from his past had provided the tools, the insight, and the momentum needed to assemble this damning dossier. Now, with every piece of evidence and every corroborating detail, John stood at the precipice of retributive action. He made a solemn promise to Mari, silently conveyed through the precise documentation and secure messages he would soon forward through Hawk and Marcus, that her truth would not be buried beneath the forest's quiet exterior. Preparing to return to his cabin and eventually relay everything to the authorities, John allowed himself a brief moment to reflect on the journey that had brought him here, from the lonely days of covert operations to the present drive to right a personal injustice. The forest and its ancient secrets had once again become the stage upon which human frailty and dark betrayal were unmasked and held accountable. And as the final light of day faded slowly behind the towering pines, John's heart was resolute. Honesty, like the steadfast spirit of the woods, would ultimately reclaim its rightful place, and Glenn would be forced to face the consequences of his perfidious act. As the pale light of dawn slowly penetrated the forest's thick canopy, an unsettling quiet fell across the secluded refuge where guilt and betrayal had once festered unnoticed. In the small town beyond the forest's edge, whispers of mounting evidence and mysterious clues had grown into a determined clamor for justice. Over the previous days, John's dossier had been transmitted securely through his contacts, Hawk, Marcus, and other trusted allies, eventually reaching the ears of regional law enforcement and a tenacious investigative journalist with a reputation for exposing corruption. Now, the net was closing in on Glenn Johnson, whose cold-hearted scheme to abandon his ailing wife was about to unravel in a blaze of public condemnation. Late one morning, while the forest gradually awakened with the sounds of chirping birds and a gentle rustle of leaves, Glenn's world began to collapse. In a nondescript office in the big city, detectives pored over the detailed video footage, photographs, and physical evidence provided by John. Among the items was the torn scrap with its ominous phrases, a series of images capturing muddy footprints and inexplicable tire tracks, and, notably, surveillance clips extracted from a hidden camera that had inadvertently recorded Glenn's parting words as he spoke on his phone with Victoria minutes before abandoning Mari. Every new detail painted a damning, comprehensive picture of premeditated betrayal and calculated cruelty. The investigators soon traced financial records and cross-referenced routine transactions, revealing a trail of secretive disbursements to obscure accounts coinciding with the fateful day in the forest. At approximately 9:30 a.m., a group of plainclothes officers descended upon Glenn's modest home and workplace. The tension was palpable as law enforcement, armed with warrants and bolstered by John's hard evidence, moved with precise determination. Glenn, who had been spending the previous night in a haze of self-delusion, certain that his plan had been flawless, was abruptly confronted by the realities he had long tried to bury. In his cluttered workshop, as he was busy tinkering with spare auto parts, the sound of heavy boots and urgent voices shattered the stillness. Officers entered his premises, systematically seizing his personal and business documents, cell phones, and computers. Meanwhile, investigative reporters, now emboldened by the mounting evidence, began arriving at the scene, their cameras and microphones recording every moment of his disintegration. Inside his home, Glenn's reaction was a mix of incredulity and mounting panic. The cold, calculated exterior he had meticulously maintained began to crumble as the sharp reality of impending justice sunk in. In a brief moment before the authorities could secure his statement, Glenn's eyes darted around in desperation. "This isn't happening," he muttered under his breath, the confident arrogance replaced by trembling fear. His mind whirled as he scoured his memories for any explanation that could absolve him, but there was no escape from the incontrovertible evidence, which had been pieced together by minds who once specialized in unmasking deception. Elsewhere, Victoria, the young mistress who had eagerly embraced the prospect of a fresh start alongside Glenn, received a curt, panicked text message from an unknown number. The message warned her, "They know. Run now." In a state of shock, Victoria abandoned the rendezvous point where she had been supposed to meet Glenn and fled into the labyrinthine stretches of suburban backstreets, leaving behind any plans and promises of a shared future. Her disappearance, swift and decisive, served as the final thread unraveling the conspiracy that Glenn had so desperately tried to hide. By midday, the media explanatory narrative had exploded onto the front pages of local newspapers and social media platforms. Journalists recounted, in detail, the twisted saga. A man determined to rid himself of an infirm and devoted wife, orchestrating a garbled vacation in the wilderness as a pretext to abandon her to her fate, only to have his calculated treachery exposed by an unexpected guardian in the woods. John's investigative work was lauded as a beacon of persistence and moral accountability. In televised interviews, one senior detective declared, "No one, regardless of their personal circumstances or relationships, is above the law. The evidence against Mr. Johnson is overwhelming, and we will not rest until justice is served. A hastily organized press conference was held at the local police headquarters. The investigative journalist, whose relentless dedication had coaxed the truth out of the shadows, revealed the damning recordings, photographs, and financial evidence. The broadcast, powerful and raw, struck the hearts of viewers across the region. It was a story of betrayal so stark that viewers could hardly believe how a man, so steeped in bitterness and betrayal, could be so callously inhumane. Yet here it was vividly chronicled through the unseen lens of truth and human decency. Glenn's legal team scrambled to piece together a defense, but the momentum was insurmountable. Within days, charges were formally filed against him, ranging from abandonment of a vulnerable person to fraud and obstruction of justice. The legal fallout rippled quickly. Business partners distanced themselves, investors pulled their support, and his once stable reputation disintegrated under the weight of public scandal. In the courtroom, his once impenetrable facade was thoroughly dismantled by damning evidence and eyewitness testimonies. The climactic turning point came when a recorded confession, captured by the hidden camera that Glenn had carelessly overlooked, was unveiled during the trial. In that stark, unedited footage, Glenn's voice rang out with chilling indifference as he discussed the planned act and his hopes of escaping accountability. The confession not only sealed his fate but also ignited outrage far beyond the local community. The trial, broadcast live, stirred emotions nationwide and underscored a powerful truth. The powerful may try to hide behind deceit, but the pursuit of justice, in concert with the courage of ordinary people, will always prevail. As the courthouse found Glenn guilty on multiple counts, Victoria's name faded into obscurity, her whereabouts unknown and her complicity uncomfortably apparent. The public exposure was a cathartic release for the many who had suffered in silence. Meanwhile, the stirring outpouring of support for Mari, whose quiet endurance had now become a rallying symbol for countless others, underscored a profound transformation. No longer the isolated and desolate figure abandoned in the woods, Mari's struggle had ignited a movement that demanded fairness and compassion for all vulnerable souls. The fall of Glenn Johnson was not merely the condemnation of a single man. It was a resounding affirmation that betrayal and cruelty, no matter how carefully concealed, would eventually be brought to light. With reputations shattered, businesses lost, and freedom stripped away, Glenn's world had crumbled. And as legal proceedings advanced and the media spotlight intensified, a new era of accountability had begun to dawn. The promise that even the darkest of deeds would eventually face the relentless force of justice. In the wake of Glenn Johnson's dramatic downfall, the unmasking of his calculated betrayal, the unraveling of his once-hidden lies, and his subsequent conviction, the quiet community of Oregon began to heal from a wound inflicted by greed and callous cruelty. For Mari Johnson, whose once shattered world had been reduced to a lonely hillside in the depths of the forest, the days that followed the trial marked the beginning of an unforeseen rebirth. Mari's transformation was not instantaneous. In the months after Glenn's arrest, she endured long evenings filled with tears and bitter reflections on trust, love, and abandonment. Yet amid the darkness of loss, a resolute spark emerged. Embracing the support of her newfound friends and allies, neighbors, fellow survivors, and compassionate advocates who rallied around her, Mari gradually reconstructed the pieces of her life with a fragile, yet determined, hope. Word of her ordeal and subsequent resilience spread across local media, and soon she found herself at the center of interviews that not only recounted a personal tragedy but also echoed the voices of countless women who had been betrayed or discarded by those they had once loved. In a modest community hall in a nearby town, Mari spoke before a small but rapt audience during a public forum organized by local women's advocacy groups. Her voice, though still soft, now carried a new strength, an unwavering declaration against injustice. "I was abandoned in the middle of nowhere," she recalled, her eyes glistening with both sorrow and determination. "I was left to fend for myself in a place that should have been a haven, and I felt utterly invisible. But I learned that no betrayal, however deep, defines us. Our capacity to rebuild, to rise from the ashes, is boundless." Her words resonated deeply, sparking tears and applause in equal measure. Mari soon came to embody the voice of resilience, a living testimony that true strength is forged in the crucible of betrayal and pain. Amidst Mari's healing, a quiet mystery continued to intertwine with her narrative. John, the compassionate forest recluse who had first discovered her abandoned state on that fateful day, had quietly become a hero in the eyes of many, despite never seeking the limelight. In the immediate aftermath of the investigation, John's steadfast contributions, his meticulous gathering of evidence, and his unflinching stand for justice had played a pivotal role in unmasking Glenn's betrayal. But just as mysteriously as he had emerged, John began to withdraw from public view. No one saw him as he slipped back into the vast solitude of the forest, leaving behind only subtle traces of his presence. One crisp autumn morning, shortly after Mari's inspiring interview was broadcast on local television, a neatly folded envelope was discreetly delivered to her new residence, a modest home in a quiet part of town built not long after her relocation. With trembling hands, Mari opened the envelope to find a handwritten letter, its ink slightly smudged by the passage of time as if echoing the hardships of its author. The letter read, "Dear Mari, I have long believed that the darkness of cruelty is best answered by the enduring light of truth and compassion. In witnessing your courage, I have seen that even the most wounded hearts can foster hope and rebuild what has been lost. While my role in this journey has come to a close, know that my spirit and my conviction remain with you. Use your voice, share your truth, and become the beacon that guides others out of the shadows. Justice, like the steady pulse of the forest, endures and will always find its way through the deepest night." John. The elegant simplicity of John's farewell stirred a conflux of emotions within Mari, a heartfelt gratitude for the man who had not only saved her from physical abandonment, but had also awakened in her the capacity to see beyond sorrow to a future filled with possibilities. Though she never met John again, his parting words became a cherished talisman, a reminder that the quiet forces of compassion and justice are eternal, even if their bearers remain forever unseen. In the months that followed, Mari gradually transformed her pain into passionate advocacy. She engaged with support groups, conducted workshops for women who had suffered similar betrayals, and partnered with several local organizations dedicated to protecting the rights of vulnerable individuals. Mari's story, once a quiet tragedy confined to the hidden recesses of a forest, now became a clarion call for systemic change, an emblem of hope for those who believed that love could be a sanctuary, not a prison. Her face, once etched with the marks of heartbreak, now radiated a serene determination. In interviews and public appearances, Mari would often speak of the forest not as a place of abandonment, but as a witness to her rebirth, a living canvas where betrayal had given way to the promise of renewal. "I've learned," she would say softly, "that even in our darkest moments, if we find the courage to speak out, our voices can summon justice and warmth where there was only cold indifference." The media, enamored with Mari's resilience, chronicled her journey from a battered soul to a symbol of empowerment. News outlets, local and national alike, recounted her story with empathy, and her transformation inspired a broader conversation about the protection of vulnerable individuals and the responsibilities of caregivers. Mari's poignant journey resonated with many, and soon she was invited to speak at community events and even contribute to policy-making discussions focused on safeguarding the rights and dignity of those living with disabilities. And so, as seasons changed and the quiet rhythms of the forest continued to flow unperturbed by human dramas, Mari embraced a new chapter, a life defined not by betrayal, but by the promise of healing, justice, and love reborn. In her final public interview for the local station, a soft, heartfelt recollection of past sorrows interwoven with a hopeful vision for the future, Mari spoke directly to the camera. "The journey has been long and painful," she admitted. "But in my pain I found my voice, and in my voice, I discovered the power to change not only my world but the world of others. Justice is not just a word, it is something we each have the power to create." As the camera panned away, capturing a subtle yet enduring smile on her face, viewers were left with the profound understanding that sometimes, the most transformative stories begin in the darkest corners of despair and emerge, shining, with the enduring light of hope. Sometimes evil seems unpunished, but goodness never remains silent for long. Subscribe so you won't miss the next story that proves justice always finds its way. Post in the comments where are you watching from.